There were 2 plates in the dishwasher that night, both spotless. Still wet, untouched. I had cooked dinner, set the table, lit a candle that had dust on the wick. I even put on that awful jazz playlist she once said made the house feel like a movie. But she didn't come downstairs. At 8:03 p.m., her door clicked shut. Not slammed. Not even loud. Just firm. Like punctuation. I sat in silence, listening to the low hum of the fridge and the faint sound of her pacing above me. The ceiling creaked in patterns I didn't recognize. Lighter than usual. Not her bare feet. She wasn't alone. I didn't know that yet. Not completely. But my stomach did. The next morning, the coffee pot was empty, and so was her side of the bed. Not messy. Just cold. I touched the pillow like it was a crime scene. By noon, she texted, "Can we please not talk today? I just need a little space. Mentally. Emotionally. Everything." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Then another. Then nothing. Instead, I stared at the blinking cursor like it might send a message for me. Maybe something brave. Or angry. Or useful. But all I had was silence. I cleaned the garage that day. For hours. Scrubbed the concrete floor with a toothbrush. Rearranged the paint cans by color, then by brand, then alphabetically, just to keep from breaking. That evening, I watched her car pull into the driveway, headlights off. She stayed inside for 13 minutes before coming in. I counted. She wore makeup. She never wears makeup on Tuesdays. No bag. No laptop. Just her phone in her hand, and a look I didn't recognize. Not guilt. Not pride. Something in between. Something I couldn't read anymore. She didn't say hi. Didn't look at me. Just, "I'm going upstairs." So I followed her with my silence. That became the rule. She stopped talking. I stopped asking. She needed to clear her head. I let her. But mine was getting louder by the hour. And then, on the 5th night, I opened the spare bedroom closet looking for a blanket. What I found instead made my chest collapse. Not drugs. Not another phone. Not lingerie. Worse. A tiny square box. Velvet. Open. Empty. I hadn't seen that box in 5 years. It was the one I proposed with. I remember the rain that night. How she laughed when I dropped the ring in the grass. How we drank terrible wine out of paper cups. That box was supposed to be buried in some drawer, forgotten, but sacred. Why was it in the closet? Why was it open? Why was it empty? She said she wanted space. She was building a world without me. And I was starting to realize. I'd been helping her do it. I didn't ask her about the ring box. I stared at it for a long time. I even held it in my palm, turning it slowly, wondering if maybe it had just fallen from somewhere. But it hadn't. It had been placed. Deliberately. Positioned just so, like a forgotten relic meant to be discovered at the exact moment it would hurt most. I put it back exactly where I found it, and closed the closet door like I hadn't seen anything at all. That evening, she laughed at something on her phone. I was in the next room, folding laundry I didn't wear anymore. Her voice sounded so light, so young, like a girl I hadn't heard in years. But I wasn't the reason she was laughing. I kept imagining who might be. There's something horrifying about watching someone you love move on before your eyes, before they've even left. Watching them build a new world, brick by invisible brick, while still sleeping under the same roof as you. Sharing your air, using your coffee mugs, leaving their perfume in the hallway like breadcrumbs for a version of themselves you're not invited to meet. That night, she got a phone call at 11:24 p.m. She didn't take it in the bedroom. She went outside, barefoot, standing in the cold on the back porch in just her cardigan. I watched her through the slats and the blinds. I couldn't hear anything except her pacing, and that low, hushed tone she used when she didn't want to wake someone she didn't care about. She stayed out there for nearly 30 minutes. I stared at the microwave clock the entire time. When she came back in, her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. That's something people don't tell you. Eyes can be red for 1,000 reasons. Rage. Wind. Smoke. Secrets. She passed me on the stairs. I opened my mouth. Closed it again. And she said, "What?" Not what's wrong. Not are you okay. Just, what? I didn't answer. I just went to bed. I lay there for hours staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in my life, I imagined what the house would sound like without her in it. Not in a cruel way. Not out of revenge. But in that quiet, distant, panicked way you think about the ocean after almost drowning in it. That next morning, I opened our shared laptop while she was in the shower. I didn't mean to snoop. I just wanted to find a grocery list I typed last week. That's the truth. But what I saw in the browser history stopped me cold. Airbnb. 1 guest. 5 nights. Out of state. I stared at the screen like it would explain itself. It didn't. And the worst part? It was booked for next week. Not a work trip. Not a girl's getaway. Just her. Alone. Or, at least, that's what the listing said. I heard the water shut off. I closed the tab. She came downstairs 10 minutes later with wet hair and kissed me on the cheek. First time in days. She smiled, like everything was normal. Like I was still the version of me that hadn't seen the empty ring box. Or the Airbnb reservation. Or the 11:24 p.m. calls from no caller ID. That's when I knew. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a prop. A placeholder. And I had no idea how much worse it was going to get. The moment she left for work that morning, I went straight to the hallway mirror. Not to look at myself, but to listen. I had to check if I'd imagined it. But no, it was still there. Behind the mirror, just like always, was the hidden cabinet. The one we used to store old letters, random souvenirs, keys to locks we no longer remembered, and, most importantly, our passports. Hers was gone. Mine was still there. She hadn't told me anything about a trip abroad. No mention of vacation days. No countdown. Just one missing passport. Like a silent declaration that something was ending, or about to begin. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, staring at the hollow space where her passport used to rest. It felt like staring at a chalk outline. Nothing there, but something terrible had clearly happened. And still, I said nothing. I went about my day. I answered emails I didn't care about. Heated up soup I didn't taste. Scrolled through old pictures I hadn't looked at in years. I kept zooming in on her face, trying to catch the moment she stopped looking at me the same way. Like maybe love had an expiration date you could see if you looked close enough. At 6:40 p.m., her phone buzzed on the coffee table while she was folding laundry upstairs. It was face down, lit up, just once. I didn't mean to touch it. I didn't even move toward it. But the name burned into my vision so hard I swore it left a mark. Coach B. Just that. No emoji. No last name. No other messages in view. But something about that name made my spine tighten. She hadn't been to the gym in months. I waited until she came back downstairs. Waited until she picked up the phone, glanced at it, locked the screen, and put it in her sweater pocket without a word. She didn't even flinch. I almost asked, "Who's Coach B?" But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Do you want me to make dinner?" She looked at me like I'd offered to help her bury a body. Confused. Suspicious. Then, "No, I'm not hungry." And she walked back out the front door. No purse. Just keys and her phone. No goodbye. No explanation. I watched her from the living room window, standing behind the curtain like some forgotten neighbor. She didn't get in the car. She just stood at the edge of the driveway, tapping her phone like she was waiting for something. Or someone. Then headlights pulled up. Not an Uber. Not a delivery. A black Jeep with tinted windows and music playing low enough that you couldn't make out the words, just the bass line, throbbing like a second heartbeat in the driveway. She opened the passenger door, slid in, and they were gone. I didn't breathe until the sound faded. That night, I sat in the shower for almost an hour with the water running cold. My skin went numb before the truth did. She had already left me. The only difference was, she hadn't moved out yet, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to confront her, or see how far she'd go without knowing I knew. The next morning, she was humming. Humming. Like the version of her I used to know when we were happy. The version that sang while brushing her teeth, that danced in the kitchen while waiting for toast to pop. That version had been gone for months. And now, suddenly, there she was, right across the table from me, sipping coffee like everything was normal. I asked if she slept well. She nodded and smiled. Better than I have in weeks. I wanted to scream, but I smiled back. Because if I acknowledged it, if I said even one word about what I saw, about the Jeep, the missing passport, Coach B, or the Airbnb, then I couldn't unsay it. The lie would shatter, and everything would spill out. And the truth was, I wasn't ready. Later that day, I did something I told myself I'd never do. I followed her. She said she had a meeting across town and wouldn't be home until late. She wore makeup again, heels she hadn't touched since our anniversary dinner a year ago. She even curled her hair. And when I complimented her, she didn't thank me. She just looked past me, like I was background noise. 15 minutes after she left, I grabbed my keys and followed. She drove to the edge of the city, near the warehouse district where nobody goes unless you're lost or meeting someone on purpose. Her car pulled into a gated lot behind a row of old industrial buildings. I parked far enough back to stay out of view, heart slamming so hard it felt like I was breathing through concrete. She got out of the car. So did he. Coach B. He was younger than I expected. Bulkier. Confident in that lazy, careless way. He didn't touch her, but they walked close. Too close. She smiled at him like I hadn't seen in years. I didn't get out. I didn't take pictures. I just sat there, fingers clenched around the steering wheel, nails cutting into the leather. That night, I didn't ask how her meeting went. She didn't volunteer anything. Instead, she came to bed early. She lay beside me, scrolling through her phone in the dark. The screen glowed across her face. I turned to watch her, pretending to sleep, wondering what she saw when she looked at me now. Pity? Guilt? Nothing. She locked the screen, set the phone down, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me space lately. I know I've been hard to live with." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I was already somewhere else, in that parking lot, watching her disappear through the back door of a building I couldn't enter. And then came the final blow. The next morning, she printed a document from her laptop and left it on the counter by accident. I saw it when I went to make coffee. It was an itinerary. Flight confirmation. 2 tickets. Her name. A man named Blake. Destination, Portugal. Departure, Saturday. I stood there holding that paper like it might burst into flames in my hand. She hadn't just left me emotionally. She was leaving the country. And I had 3 days to decide if I was going to pretend I didn't know, or destroy everything before she boarded that plane. I didn't confront her. Not that morning. Not that night. Not even after seeing her name printed right next to his, Blake. That was Coach B, I realized. Of course. Coach Blake. The casual nickname had been a disguise, a soft blur around something sharp. She came home that night, carrying 2 grocery bags. Fresh herbs. Expensive cuts of steak. A bottle of red wine she never drank alone. She was glowing. That's the only word I can use for it. She glowed with a kind of wild, careless energy, like someone who'd already slipped the noose. Every smile she gave me that evening made me want to scream into a pillow. Because it wasn't for me. It wasn't about me. I was just collateral, a silent witness to her transition into a new life. "Let's have dinner together tonight," she said. I agreed. What else could I do? She cooked. She danced around the kitchen to a playlist she hadn't used since our engagement party. She even asked me to open the wine. I played along. For 2 hours, I sat across from the woman who was leaving me in 3 days, eating the food she made for someone else. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. She wasn't cooking for me. She was rehearsing. I watched her chew, sip, laugh at something she said. And I started wondering, what was she hoping I'd do? Was this her twisted mercy? Her way of easing me out? A parting gift? A guilt offering? Or worse, did she think I'd never find out? When she left the table to take a call, I followed her phone screen's reflection in the window. She turned her back, whispering in the laundry room, using a tone I hadn't heard in years. Light, fast, breathless. It wasn't about work. It wasn't about me. Later that night, while she showered, I opened her closet. There it was, a new suitcase. Price tag still attached. Half-packed. Summer clothes. A passport. A printed map. A paper with a Portuguese address. I read it 3 times. Memorized every word. But then I saw something that stopped me cold. Tucked into the side pocket was a tiny velvet box. Not the box. Not my ring. A new one. I opened it. Inside was a gold band. Men's size. Engraved. B+M. Always. I dropped it. The sound it made on the floor was so small. So hollow. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands for what felt like hours. My heartbeat had slowed to something unnatural. I felt like I was watching someone else's life. Some pathetic character too scared to fight, too weak to leave, too late to matter. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited for the water to stop running. For the light under the bathroom door to turn off. For the woman who used to be my wife to crawl into bed beside me, unaware that I had touched her future and realized I was no longer in it. She exhaled, calm, content, inches away from me. And I whispered, so softly I barely heard it myself, "I hope your flight gets delayed." She didn't respond. She was already asleep. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the digital clock on the nightstand move from 12 to 4:56 in cruel, slow motion. Every time I blinked, I'd hear the sound of the velvet ring box hitting the floor again, over and over, like it was echoing through the walls. By sunrise, something inside me had shifted. Not snapped, not broken, just realigned. For weeks, I'd been a ghost in my own home. Silenced, replaced, made small. But that morning, I didn't feel small. I felt precise, calm, like the moment right before a scalpel touches skin. She was still asleep when I left the house. I drove in silence. No music, no talk radio, just the low hum of the engine and the buzz of streetlights flickering out one by one as the sun rose. I pulled into a parking lot I hadn't visited in years, our old storage unit. The place we dumped everything from our first apartment when we bought the house. She always said we should clean it out, sell the junk, start fresh. Fresh. I punched in the code. The gate opened. Inside, it smelled like old furniture and dust and cardboard memories. I found the boxes quickly, one she probably forgot existed. Labeled in her handwriting. College. Old stuff. I opened one and dug past yearbooks, Polaroids, some crumpled scarves, and then I found them. Her journals. She used to write constantly. Morning pages. Night reflections. Dreams. Fears. All of it. I used to tease her that she was documenting a life more interesting than we were living. She told me once, if I ever lose my mind, these notebooks will remind me who I used to be. I took the journals and left. At home, she was in the kitchen, making eggs like we were some happy couple in a weekend ad. You were up early, she said. I nodded. Doing what? Cleaning out the past. She smiled at that, not knowing. I waited until she left for her so-called errands later that afternoon before I opened the journals. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a pattern, a clue, some sign that this wasn't just about Blake, that it had always been coming. What I found was worse, because it wasn't about him. It was about me. There were pages, entire entries, written long before Coach Blake, long before the job stress, long before we stopped sleeping at the same time. Pages describing me as emotionally exhausting. Too much. Small and safe, but never thrilling. A kind man, but not a man I ache for. I kept reading. One entry, dated 2 years ago, said, sometimes I think I married him because I was afraid no one else would love me. Now I feel like I'm suffocating in my own kindness. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking. That's when I understood. She hadn't cheated because something went wrong recently. She had been gone for years. Her body stayed. Her voice stayed. Her routines. Her toothbrush. Her shoes by the door. But the wanting, that left long ago. I wasn't mourning the end. I was finally catching up to it. And yet, despite everything I'd read, everything I knew, something kept me still. Because I wasn't going to scream, or cry, or beg. I was going to let her leave. But not the way she planned. No, I was going to give her what she wanted most. A clean break. One she didn't control. By Friday morning, I had done something she never expected. I made peace with the ending. Not the kind where you forgive and forget. The kind where you let the air go out of the balloon and just watch it fall. Silent. Flat. Over. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I just started removing myself from the life we built, piece by piece, without a sound. That day, I went through the house like a man walking through someone else's memories. I boxed up my side of the closet. Not everything, just the things that meant something. The shirt she bought me the first Christmas we lived together. The book I read to her when she had the flu. The photo strip from that awful carnival date she said was so stupid it was perfect. I left the rest behind. In the office, I pulled out our shared lockbox and removed my name from the joint account. I transferred my direct deposit back to my old personal bank. She wouldn't notice right away. She was too distracted. But soon, she'd see the quiet disappearance of my support, of my blind loyalty. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it so she could finally feel what she claimed to want so badly. Solitude. I also printed out something she forgot existed, the prenup. She never took it seriously. We signed it during our engagement because my dad insisted. Trust is beautiful, he said, but signatures are cleaner in court. It was simple. If she ever left first, emotionally or physically, the house defaulted to me. We never changed it. She didn't remember, but I did. That night, she came home late. 10:34 p.m. Same black Jeep. She didn't even pretend to care now. She walked in with mascara smudged and a sweater that wasn't hers. It was too big. Men's size. Probably his. I was in the kitchen, sipping tea. She looked at me and tilted her head, confused by the calm in my face. "What's this?" she asked, nodding at the envelopes stacked on the table. I smiled. "Just some things for you to take on your trip." She picked them up, flipped through. One was the prenup, highlighted. One was a printed list of utilities now under her name. One was a typed letter from me, 2 paragraphs long. I watched her read it. I didn't speak. Her hand started shaking halfway through the second page. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. And for once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. When she looked at me, there was no anger, no betrayal, just fear, real fear, like she finally realized I was no longer under her spell. "Wait," she whispered. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I answered, "you don't need to leave the country to start a new life. You can start it right here, alone." She opened her mouth again, but I stopped her. I stood. I walked upstairs. I locked the bedroom door. And for the first time in months, I slept. Not well, not fully, but enough to know that something had ended. And that tomorrow, she would wake up in a world that finally looked the way she claimed she wanted. One where I was no longer trying to be enough. The morning she left, I didn't say goodbye. I didn't watch her pack. I didn't check if she took the ring. I didn't ask where her flight was connecting or how long she'd be gone. I just listened to the echo of her heels as she walked down the hallway one last time, the soft click of the front door opening, then closing behind her. No tears, no slamming, just the quiet of something finished. She didn't leave a note, didn't send a message, but that silence was louder than anything she could have written. After the door shut, I walked through the house. It was still half full. Her things were everywhere. Her hairbrush on the sink, her shoes by the stairs, a mug with lipstick on the rim. She hadn't fully moved out. She'd left the mess behind for later. But I wasn't waiting. I opened every window. I let the air rush in and carry the weight out. I turned on music, my music, the stuff she used to roll her eyes at. I danced like an idiot while making eggs and spilled coffee on the counter and laughed. I laughed, not because it was funny, because I was still here. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was performing in my own house. Later that week, I boxed up the rest of her things. I didn't break anything. I didn't burn her photos. I didn't touch her journals. I just packed them carefully, respectfully, and dropped them off at her sister's place with a note that said, "No hard feelings. Just finally listening to what we both knew." I filed the papers, kept the house, split the accounts fairly, and then I started doing something I hadn't done in years. Living. I planted a small garden, took up running, joined a community board I used to ignore, and I went back to therapy, not to talk about her, but about me. The version of me I left behind while trying to hold something broken together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, simple, real. And then one afternoon, months later, I saw her name pop up on my phone. A text. Just one sentence. I made a mistake. I stared at it. Then I smiled. And I didn't reply, because she didn't break me. She released me. And now, I'm not the same man who begged for attention in his own kitchen. I'm not the man who waited by the window while she laughed in someone else's car. I'm someone else. Someone lighter. Someone whole. And the silence she left behind, that silence finally belongs to me.